Okay, so one thing with notes, and I say this every time we start to do notes, you need to keep them organized. These notes aren't for me, all right? I can do this stuff. These notes are for you. More than likely on your test next Tuesday or Wednesday, probably Tuesday, over this standard, I will let you use your notes because there's a lot of different things we're doing, okay? But your notes are only helpful to you if they're organized. So every time we take notes, I always tell you, start on a blank page. Put your heading at the top. Now, if it was my notebook, I would use a highlighter and highlight my topic. Okay. That way, as I'm flipping through my notebook, all right, I can see what my topics were. Okay. It's very clear at the top. So therefore, anytime I need to look for something, my heading is right there at the top. Okay. The more organized your notebook is, the more beneficial it is to you and the easier it is for you to use. Okay. I guarantee almost any adult that keeps notes, if you look at their notebook, their heading of whatever the notes was about is going to be different than their actual notes. Okay. It's going to stand out. That way they can see as they're flipping through their notebook what the topic was that was written on that page. Okay. What we're doing today are honestly just complete opposites of each other. So that's why I'm putting them on the same page, right? There's not a lot to write down, and they're exact opposites of each other. So that's why I included them on the same page. All right. So today we're continuing with the same standard that we've been doing. Okay. No matter which form of a number you're given, decimal, percent, fraction, you should be able to switch to the other two numbers. So if I give you a decimal, you should be able to change to a fraction and a percent. If I give you a percent, you should be able to change to a decimal and a fraction. Okay? Your notes are going to be super helpful for that, but they've got to be organized. All right? Shoved in the bottom of your backpack is not organized. That's why we have a notebook just for math. All right? So, luckily, changing from a percent to a decimal and changing from a decimal to a percent does not require math computation. It can, but there's a much easier way to do it without. So that's what we're going to look at today. Jeremiah and Malik, would you mind closing your computers for me? Thank you. All right, so first one we're going to look at, writing a percent as a decimal. Okay, first thing you're going to do, because it is no longer a decimal, is to remove your percent sign. And just in case we forgot what that looks like, that's what a percent sign looks like. So when you're changing from a percent to a decimal, first thing you need to do is get rid of the percent sign because it's not a percent anymore. It's going to be a decimal. Then you are going to simply move the decimal point 2 places to the left, making sure I had that right up there. So when you're going from a percent to a decimal, you are going to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. Now, If you really like to make it a little bit harder on yourself and like to do computation, moving a decimal point to the left 2 places is the same as dividing by 100. Okay? But you don't have to divide. You can simply just move the decimal point 2 places to the left. Aubrey? Not when you're going from a percent to a decimal. You're going to want to move it 2 places to the left. Okay, so it's no longer a percent, so you get rid of the percent sign. Then you're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the left, or you can divide by 100. And we'll do examples once we take our notes for the next set. Is that better up there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
And if you have a maybe multiply, you actually get three numbers, but you have to move the decimal like 2 spaces.
We're going to talk about that when we do our examples. Okay? It's a good question, though. All right, so the opposite of that would be changing a decimal to a percent. All right, so we're starting with a decimal. To change that to a percent, you are going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right this time. So you're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right. Okay, or that's the same as multiplying by 100. Right, so for a decimal to go to a percent, you're moving it 2 places to the right. Bless you. Then, in order for it to be an actual percent, you must add a percent sign. And again, that's what it looks like if you've forgotten. Right, so no computation necessarily involved, just moving a decimal point. You'll have to pay attention to which one you're using. That way you know which way you're moving the decimal point. All right, we're going to do a few examples of each. So first we'll look at changing percents to decimals. So if I have 27% and I want to change that to a decimal, first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the decimal point. So I just have the number 27. Now, you have to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. But since it was a percent and it was a whole number, we didn't write a decimal point in the number. Where is the decimal point in the number 27? Leanna? That would be 2 7/10. Kaylee? After the 7. Okay? This is something that seems to always just kind of stump kids. When we have a whole number, such as 27, we don't write a decimal point in it anywhere because it's a whole number. There is a decimal point, it's just at the end. So that is the first thing you're going to have to make sure you remember. That way you know where the decimal point is and can actually move it like you need to. Okay? So then all you have to do, move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So what is 27% as a decimal? Tristan?
0.27.
And I like that he included the 0. Okay. If there is not a number before the decimal point, you have to have a 0. Okay. So notice when we move the decimal point to the left 2 places, there's nothing in front of the decimal point. When you write it as a decimal, it must have the 0 in front of it. So 27% is the same as 27 hundredths, which kind of makes sense because percents are out of 100. Questions? You're just moving the decimal point to the left 2 places and then adding that 0 if there's no whole number. Another example, if we had 15%, first thing, get rid of the percent sign. Where is the decimal in the number 15? Alicia? After the 5. You have to know that. If you don't know where it is, you can't move it. Move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So what is 15% as a decimal? Jeremiah?
0 and 1500.
Yep. Just make sure when we're reading decimals, if it's a 0, you can ignore that when you're reading it and just say 15 and then the place value of the 500ths. Okay, but it's written as 0.15, but read as 1500ths. Okay, decimal point gets moved back 2 places, but make sure you have that 0 in front. Now, this one is slightly different. Solve it the same way and you'll get the right answer. Get rid of the percent sign. So we just have the number 4. Where is the decimal point in the number 4? Anicia? After the 4. So when I move it to the left 2 places, we have an empty space. What do we always fill empty spaces with? Alicia? A 0. So what is 4% as a decimal? Liana?
0.04.
Yes. Okay. 0.04 or 4 hundredths. It is not 4 tenths. 4 tenths is not 4%. So that is why I always tell you, move the decimal point, like actually move it. That way you know if there's empty spaces that you need to fill with zeros. Okay. And then another one that's a little different is when you have percents over 100. But if you follow the 2 steps, you won't have problems. Get rid of the decimal or the percent sign. 135. Where's the decimal point in 135? Gavin? After the 5. Okay. Move it back 2 spaces. What is 135% as a decimal? Gavin?
1.35.
Yes, 1 and 35 hundredths. Okay. It's greater than 100%. So this is where it's one of those things that does my answer make sense? This is greater than 100%. You're going to have a decimal bigger than 1. These were all less than 100%. So you had to have decimals less than 1. 100% is 1. So again, ask yourself, does my answer make sense? Okay. So you can have percents greater than 100, and they're going to be numbers bigger than 1. Any questions about changing a percent to a decimal? Get rid of the percent sign, move the decimal point to the left 2 places. Okay. Then, exact opposite of that. So now we are going to move our decimal point to the right 2 places and add a percent sign. Okay. So if I have 3 tenths, obviously I know where the decimal point is. It's there. So all I have to do is move it to the right 2 places. Fill your space with 0. So 3 tenths is what as a percent? Anicia? 30%, not 3. And if you don't have the percent sign, it's wrong. The number 30 is not 30%. You have to have the percent sign. Okay? So that again is why I like for you to actually move the decimal point on your paper or on your screen if you're using page marker, so you know if there's spaces you need to fill with 0. 82 hundredths. Okay, there's a decimal point for you. Michael, what do we think it's going to be?
82%.
Absolutely. Take that decimal point, move it 2 places to the right. There's nothing that we need to fill in. Okay, I promise it really is this easy. 7, 51 hundredths. Okay, we need a percent sign. Elizabeth,
51%.
absolutely. Take that decimal point, move it 2 places to the right. Okay, we'll end up having a 9 because first hour someone brought up another kind of different situation that I want to show you also. 1 and 75 hundredths. First of all, what is different about 8 than 5, 6, and 7?
There's a 1
We have hands for several reasons. The greatest one in school is to raise and wait our turn. Jeremiah, what is different about 8 than 5, 6, and 7?
It has a 1 before the decimal.
Absolutely. Okay. This is greater than 1. So again, think about what a common sense answer would be. So Jeremiah, our percent is going to be greater than what?
1.
It is, because our number is bigger than 1. So Jeremiah, what would our percent be?
475.
Yes. And you need your percent sign, otherwise it would be wrong. Okay. Then, like I said, first hour, someone asked me a really good question of something like this. So let's look at a number similar to this. 276 thousandths. Okay. Follow the steps and you won't have any problems. Okay. That's why I give you very basic steps. Gavin, what do we think this percent is going to be?
276.
Why would it be 276?
No,
Okay.
27. I don't know. I think it's 27.
You can't just get rid of a number. You're on the right track.
Oh.
You got to have some confidence. Aubrey, what's it going to be?
It's going to be 276.
You can have, not very typical, but you can have a decimal point in a percent. Not very often, but you can. So you take this decimal point, move it 2 places to the right. 27.6%. Okay. Now I'm going to use a few of the things that Gavin said. Okay. Not to pick on him, but sometimes I like mistakes because then it's a great teaching tool. So I always reinforce, does my answer make sense? Okay. So when we talked about number 8, Jeremiah explained to us that this was going to be more than 100%. Why was that, Jeremiah? Because there's a 1 before the decimal point. So we knew this was going to be greater than 100%. So when Gavin was trying to come up with his answer for 9, I could tell he wasn't sure. Okay, language arts thing because of the tone in his voice. I knew he wasn't sure of his answer, but he was coming up with an answer. So, Gavin, why should you have known this wasn't going to be 200% based on what Jeremiah just told us? What is before the decimal? A 0. So therefore, we should know this is not going to be greater than 100%. And that might help you clear up that like confusion and hesitation. Okay? Always ask yourself, does my answer make sense? All right? If there's no number before your decimal point, your percent has to be less than 1 or 100. Okay? So, percent to decimal. Move our decimal point 2 places to the left. Decimal to percent. Move our decimal point 2 places to the right. Okay? So, before we start talking and getting off task, here's what you were doing. Either from your agenda or through Canvas, you're doing page 113, 1 through 12, and submitting it in Canvas. You're just moving decimal points. Slow down, read the question, and there should be no problem with getting a really good grade on this. When you finish 113, we should not be on games or anything else. We're working on our IXLs for this week, which are S, 4, 5, 6, and 7. They should be yellow. Okay?